Hey, everybody. Welcome back. This is Crystal Britt and Laura Danger with the Time to Lean podcast. And today we're airing our dirty laundry and maybe not cleaning up our shit. I'm not sure. We're doing, this is going to be a two-parter. And we're going to talk about something that is sensitive, a little nuanced, a little touchy, I think. And we're really excited to get into it.
It's good to talk about. It's good and weird, and both of those things can exist. So, top of the episode, content warnings. We're going to be talking about spirituality, religious abuse, like things that are child abuse, probably sexual abuse, things that are tied to that. So, just uh, the way that I like to temper it or recommend that clients temper media intake is to do like a body check in, hand on your chest, couple of deep grounding breaths. Am I able to intake this today? Like, am I able to dedicate part of my brain space to this today? If not, we'll be here. Listen, this episode isn't going anywhere. It'll be here for you later. Just turn it off. It's okay. You're allowed.
That's right. So, we are going to be talking about Shiny Happy People, which is a mini series on Amazon Prime.
Mm-hmm.
And it's having its viral moment right now, and people are having some really strong reactions to it. I think you and I, Crystal, have had strong reactions to it from very different contexts, different backgrounds. And so I'm just really interested. You wanted to talk about this. Like, you text me, you're like, oh my gosh, did you see it?
Yep.
Why is it such a big deal?
Okay, so Shiny Happy People, for those of you who have not seen it or have not heard about it, is a mini-series documentary, 4 episodes, which I find really interesting because it's released like a month after the Secret of Hillsong documentary on Hulu, which is also religiously based, which is also 4 episodes. And quite honestly, I could not have taken more than 4 episodes. It just is so much. It's a documentary on the Duggar family, but specifically about the, I want to say sect, but that's not what we call it in Christianity. We call it denomination. We call it like it would be considered a denomination of Christianity. IBLC, which is the Institute of Bible Learning Community. I don't know. It's IBLC is what it's referred to in the documentary. And it talks about, it was so to be clear, from the top of the episode, I was not raised. I always tell my mom and joke with my mom, like, I was raised with enough superstition and enough disbelief and a sarcasm to question people, but specifically men who ever tried to say that they were in charge of me. I was a respectful kid. I was a rule follower. I was not a rule breaker, but I was always kind of like, for those of you who have context, I'm an Enneagram 6, so I'm like very much devil's advocate when I want to be. So it's very much like this questioning space that my mom kind of instilled in us from a young age of like, even from the pulpit, this pastor may be saying this, but you need to make sure that you need to double check it through yourself, right? And so I always kind of tongue in cheek attribute my deconstruction to her, which she loves. She's like, I love that, you're falling away from faith is attributed to me. But it has been, so watching Shiny Happy People and Secret of Hillsong, honestly, were so deeply upsetting because of what has come to fruition through institutions like this, that I don't know. It's very difficult for me to try and help clients who have experienced religious trauma and figuring out how they're going to define hope from here going forward is really, really difficult. It becomes very, very difficult about how we redefine that after things like this come out.
That's really interesting. Okay, so Shiny Happy People. Shiny Happy People is a 4-part series on Amazon Prime. It follows the Duggars, or the Duggars are the family from 19 Kids and Counting. I don't know how many kids they have now, but they've been on the air for over a decade. It's
Over
gotta
a
be.
decade. Mm-hmm.
And it was, the beginning of TLC, the Learning Channel, where it's well known that TLC is pretty exploitative and takes people's stories and makes them very sensationalized. It's often people's very traumatic stories or, people who we ogle at them.
Yeah, it's
It's like putting them
voyeurism
on
at
dis
its finest. Yeah, 100%.
absolutely. And so the Duggars follow the faith. It's IBLP
Oh, thank
sect
you.
of Christianity. It is the Institute of Basic Life Principles. And so from the outside, you see them, they have the, full garb from the wrists up, the like, what do you call that thing that they wear around their neck? Like,
Oh man,
it's
I
like a little
like
prairie dress.
it's like yeah, with like a Peter Pan collar, right? But
Yes.
it's yeah, it's very
But
much
like a
from
big
like the
one.
same. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, like a pilgrim collar. It's like,
I'm sure the listeners are screaming at us exactly what it's called. But yeah, it is like that
yeah,
big frilly collar, and it's like all of the dresses are made from the same. It's so interesting because it's so close to what you picture when you picture Mormon fundamentalism
yeah,
with like the same updo, the same dress, but it's different enough where you're like, "Oh, this is a little bit, maybe this is okay."
right.
Like maybe it's all right. Maybe this is a little bit different. Maybe it's not bad.
Yeah, and the Duggars are, true to the name of the documentary, they always made their life look very nice. And the everyone was incredibly well behaved. The parents were strict. You were like, this is a little bit much, maybe. But they were generally happy. There were like mild bits of rebellion, but in general, it was TLC made it look good, happy. They were fine.
Wholesome.
Like
They made
this,
it look wholesome and some
yes.
like, oh, this is a little bit different, but look at how good it is for everybody.
Right. Like people can live different lives. Like, oh, I mean, that's part of what TLC is good for. And we watch 90 Day Fiance, which is, I believe, a TLC show. And we've been watching it for ages. And part of TLC is, it's not quite outrage, but it's like superiority. Like you watch it and you're like, oh, I definitely wouldn't do that. Like I'm
I
better
could,
than
yeah, I
that.
would never. Uh-huh, absolutely.
So that's a little bit of the Duggar stuff, but I want to say Duggars is a lot more like those follow the family. It's like the original family vlogger.
Yeah. Yep. That's so interesting. It's interesting that you should say that because I was thinking of Sarah Peterson, the interview we did with her, but in Momfluence where she talks about like not watching the train wreck, but like watching it to feel a little bit better, like watching vloggers, watching momfluencers to feel like, okay, well, at least I'm not throwing, a fucking 5-year-old's birthday party with 50 invitees and no masks that, in April of
Right.
2020, right? Like
Right.
it does give you that thing of like, okay, like at least I'm not that far gone. Yeah, there's definitely that feeling that keeps you pulled in.
Yeah. But I want to bring it back to what you were saying about hope. And so I was raised I attended the Catholic Church, and we were not necessarily welcome back by the time my parents got divorced. Like that was kind of the
We were not
around
asked
10,
back.
11. That was about very Catholic faith has a lot of traditions and a lot of rules, and one of them was, divorce is one of the big no-nos. And so I don't know if we were, I don't know the background. I don't know if we were told not to come back, or
We
it
weren't
was like,
explicitly told don't come back. It was
yeah,
just heavily implied.
very clear. So we didn't. I stopped attending. But this is something that you know very well, and I want to come back. What do you mean, like trying to redefine hope? Like that's such an interesting thing to say.
Um, now I wish I hadn't said it. No, I'm just kidding. It's okay.
Big
So,
questions here.
yeah, today is a very weird existential day for me because I'm like writing about this on Substack. I'm kind of trying to figure out it's it's very reflective, right? And by what I mean by like where do I pull hope? Like where do we, how do I navigate clients from where to pull hope? It's I didn't picture this when I got pregnant with my first kid. This is gonna make me emotional. Um, when I was pregnant with my first kid, Sandy Hook happened a month before she was born. And at that point, I didn't have any idea of what motherhood was. I didn't have any idea of what it looked like. And it's not that I have lost hope as I've deconstructed faith, but there's something really difficult about trying to figure out where am I going to cultivate that from if I don't like if what I was promised, if I believed these things was fulfillment, purpose. I have a community that's based in my church, but it's very different than what I was sold as a teenager and in my early adulthood years. Um, but it's very difficult for me to reconcile what the kind of I use evangelical Christian and Christian nationalist, and somebody in my DMs this morning used the word Christofascism, which I really loved, where I was like, I really feel like that's what we're talking about. This idea that like you're an American if you're a Christian, and these are all the things that it means, right? But it means you're homophobic, it means you're racist, it means you're anti-Semitic. Like it's all of these hard things that it's like are not are not hidden, right? They're very much like endorsed out loud. And it's hard for me to figure out how to say to my clients, like, yeah, there's hope for a better future. Like there was when you were in, like, I understand why people don't leave faith,
Yeah.
right?
I want to go to that. So I feel like anybody who listens to this or anybody who is in this exact moment in time as a parent or wanting to become a parent or choosing not to or whatever in adulthood at this specific moment in time, mass shootings, policies that are incredibly discriminatory, just if there's all of these really tough things happening, the economy, you know, we had hope. And then
Yeah.
the pandemic happened. And then I think that was a really enlightening moment for a lot of people. But
Yeah.
I just want to go back to like, I had hope for one thing. But in the context of Shiny Happy People and what you're saying about this specific context from you, what did you hope for?
Yeah. I hoped for, I hoped for certainty, I think. I think I hoped for uh, stability and surety and uh, not that things wouldn't be hard, but I hoped for a better world for my kids, right? I hoped that things would be better for them. And I think like to your point, like talking about, the pandemic, I feel like I don't know if I'm an elder millennial, but I'm an older millennial. And I graduated into the recession. I graduated in 2009. So we were already in the recession when I graduated from college. Um, and I worked at Starbucks for, a year before I went into anything that was related to my career. And even then I waited another year, or it was another year before I could get into something that I wanted to be doing. And so I feel like it's kind of been this holding pattern for a lot of elder millennials of like, oh, well, like these bad things happen, but we could keep going, right? Like it's not like it could be worse. Do you know what I mean? And then I feel like with the pandemic and then these like all of these like child sex abuse scandals coming out and all of this like eyes being open to like, oh, you can't hide from the fact that these are like patriarchal, misogynistic, like this is so in your face. We can't pretend like this is anything other than a power dynamic, a power and control, horrible cycle for everyone involved. But what we were
Yeah.
marketed was hope, right?
Yeah.
Good values for our kids, a good outcome for our kids, a better future for our kids.
Would you say that becoming a parent and following this, like having these beliefs from this faith, maybe from you, maybe from people you know, um, do you feel like there was this belief that if you followed the roles that you were given and if you played a certain part, Like that was the key to
Oh,
a better
100%.
future for everybody.
100%. It like not only was it the key to a better future for everybody, but it hinged on that. Right? Adhering to those strict gender roles is not just, hey, this would like be helpful for your like the I don't even know, like the smooth running of your household, but like I internalized and I feel like was explicitly taught through books like Love and Respect was a big one. Ben and I went to like an 8-week class with other couples on that book. That's based on the idea that what women seek is love and what men seek is respect. And it's written by Christian, like they're Christian psychologists, which biblical counseling and Christian psychology is a whole other thing I could talk for a long time about. But uh, we were sold through those kinds of like Bible studies and classes and sermons that like, no, this is your God given assignment, right? Like this is your assignment and role. And to be a good follower, you have to adhere to these gender roles and this like these traditional values, because that's what you're called to do biblically. And you will find fulfillment and purpose in doing that. And then when I became a mother who could not cook a meal or could not keep her house clean or could not, all it did was set me up for failure, right? Like I think when my family watched me go through postpartum depression, I think they thought I was getting a lot of these ideas from social media, but really I had internalized a lot of these ideas from the ideas that I had been fed in young adulthood and through like mommy blogs and from like I had been influenced through social media, but by Christian people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like for years I tried
So
to,
many,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
so many of those momfluencers are selling a very, very specific picture of motherhood that is rooted in if whether or not it's Mormonism or Christianity or whatever it is,
Right.
it's like patriarchal religious roles.
And we are told that that is our life's purpose, right? To go and spread the world to all, or spread the word to all the corners of the earth, Christians and Mormons, right? Of like, Ben and I talk about this all the time where it's like the goal was to get more people pulled across the goal line, right? If you can
Mm.
save more people, if you can convert more people, that's what the quality, like that's what the quality and the purpose of your life is for. How many people can you
Okay.
pull to this side?
So this is so interesting and really like as you're saying that really kind of is a light bulb moment for me because in Shiny Happy People they talk about how, like TV and media is not virtue or I don't know how to say that. Like it's
Oh
not a
yeah.
thing that to be celebrated in the faith that the Duggars were in. But they had the show because it was ministry. And
Yes.
they were saying, like, we are selling a positive image of this faith. And the church saw a huge influx of people joining the faith because of
Yep.
them.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think is so interesting, and I'm maybe I'm projecting here, but my understanding of my understanding of having to sell a certain story is like if it feels bad, it's an internal issue. If I'm not feeling fulfilled by motherhood the way I've been told I was supposed to be feel fulfilled, if I'm not natural at this, like Chelsea Conaboy says in Mother Brain, like if the maternal instinct is not maternal instincting,
Yep.
I still have to sell the image because I'm preaching this faith that this is the right way,
Yep.
but also that if this is not coming naturally to me, like biologically broken.
There's something wrong with me.
Now, do you, as someone, I have not had this experience, did you hear that sort of messaging explicitly, implicitly through the church if it wasn't coming naturally?
Um, that would imply that I would have let people see that it wasn't coming naturally.
Oh, wow.
And it's not, and like, that's my first like knee jerk response. It's not that I was hiding anything. It was just kind of like, almost like self deprecating of like, isn't it funny? Because like, there is nobody that has known me and Ben. We've been together since we were 16. There is no one that has known us that has ever been like, oh, well, Crystal's very submissive and Ben is like very much like head of the household, right? Though that's what like you're kind of told is like that picture. And that was kind of the like a shaker moment for me in Shiny Happy People, when they show that graphic of the umbrella of authority.
Okay,
Um,
tell everybody what that is.
okay,
What?
so Bill Gothard is the founder of IBLP, and it's a graphic where it's three umbrellas, one under the other, and it's a black and white graphic, and the top umbrella is labeled God, the umbrella under that is husband, and the umbrella under that is wife. The idea is that everyone is under God's authority. The husband is under God's authority primarily, and then like the husband answers to God, and the wife answers to the husband. The wife is under both the husband and under God. And what I wrote about in Substack today was this, like, there is nobody that has ever known me and Ben that has been like, oh, they like fell into that dynamic really easily. Right? Anyone who knew us very well, I mean, even honestly, like, knew us like in an acquaintance type of way would have caught on to this. I haven't always had pink hair, by the way. I feel like the pink hair is a kind of a dead giveaway and kind of like the reason I do it. But there's been nobody that's known us that's like, oh, they didn't like they never struggled with that. That was easy for them, right? We always struggled with that. Ben was always hesitant to be put in that like head of the household, like spiritual head of the household. It would be like, can you please like look into these churches? I feel like I'm looking for these churches because it's important to me. This should be important. We were told this should be important to him as a man. This should be the spiritual health of his family is supposed to be the top priority. I was, tried really hard to fall under that submissive, submissive, being respectful and doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But that umbrella graphic, I was like, oh shit, I have seen, like, that's when I was like, oh fuck, like this IBLP shit has leaked into everything and reminded me of my first year of college where I went to a very conservative Christian college, where 4 weeks in, I was like, I gotta get the fuck out of here. I made a mistake. Like, this was not a lot of that IBLP stuff was reinforced, and I didn't have words for it at the time. But that's when I started deconstructing, was like 4 weeks into that year. But yeah, I didn't let anybody see. It was kind of like the self-deprecating of like, oh, Crystal, she's always struggling. You know what I mean? Like, her house is never clean. I mean, I just didn't. Yeah, it was kind of like I aspire to this, so that's good enough. But internally, a lot of deep shame of like, I can't meet any of these. I don't do any of this shit. I would try and wake up at 5 a.m. to try and have my alone time to be able to like get my head together in order to like set my, intention, have my quiet time, journal, all of those things for the day.
I follow. No, I used to. I used to follow just out of like TLC style. I'm sorry, I'm outing myself. Can I be a bitch for a second?
Can I be mean for a second?
Can I be mean for a second? And I hope that the people who listen to this understand the context of like, I truly am not being mean. I am always cognizant of gray space and all that. But I always found it so interesting. There was like a Beachbody MLM mom who would wake up every morning and she was always talking about how much she struggled. And she would be like, Jesus, please take this burden off of my chest. And like these like vague booking about like all of the struggles and how hard things are and always needing to pray harder. And like, I know a couple of people in my life who have that mentality that if things are hard or if it's not coming natural or feeling fulfilling, it is, I need to pray harder. I need to give more. I should be in service of others. Like, I should fulfill my purpose under God in this specific way. I'm always, it's the same thing. They will like, and I want to bring this back to the Duggars because this part I think is, you talk about purity culture, you talk about abstinence only stuff. I know we have similar feelings on that. But if you don't know, the Duggars' oldest son has had multiple issues. Again, like trigger warning, this is a really heavy topic having to do with abuse and sexual assault. He had harmed his siblings and other children, correct?
He was charged with molesting two of his sisters and then child in possession of child pornography.
Right. So at least that's
at
what he was
least that.
charged with.
Right.
Public knowledge, and we can get into that in a second. But it was dealt with in the church. was dealt with behind closed doors. There was this idea of like praying
Makes me want
and
to pull my
sending
face
him
off.
Christian counseling. And there's this idea that like if it's not going according to plan in the way that I was taught that I was supposed to do this, like it's an individual failure. We need to subscribe harder. And that always, and it's almost like the people that I know that deconstruct, like you said, like I'm going to go until I get to a really Christian college and then I'm like, "Oh no,
Yep.
explode, explode."
Yep.
Because when one thing falls,
And that's
what does it mean for everything else?
it. And that's the thing, right? Like for some people, for me, it was. For me, it was like being a decent fucking human being that like started pulling at that thread. I was once in a, I mean, I okay. I'm just gonna give the full context. So it's called the Masters University now, but I attended the Masters College for 1 year, in Santa Clarita. Very small, like total student population 1,500 kids, right? Um, John MacArthur is a very famous preacher, Bible commentarian, blah blah blah. Uh, I heard that motherfucker from his pulpit. Because during Welcome Week we had to attend his church because you only had so many chapel misses, and during Welcome Week those counted. So you had to go to his church. So going to that church, I heard him make fun of a homeless woman from the pulpit, and like making fun of like the interaction he had with her and the number of teeth she had. And I was like, you've got to be fucking kidding me, right? Like it was, and it was like no one else, like I looked around at people, like no one else was questioning it. And I was like, no, this is like a full blown red flag for me. Like, are you kidding me? Like, what is happening? Even this like small snapshot, like if you're gonna stand, I mean, it's a mega church. If you're gonna stand in front of like an entire mega church and say things like this, what the fuck are you talking about when you're not on stage? Are you fucking
Yeah.
kidding me? But so that was like one tiny piece that unraveled. For some people, it's gender roles. For other people, it's the concept of hell. But all of that all of the churches that are evangelical that are built on fear and control. I mean, Mormonism as well, Catholicism, I'm sure as well. Everything that is built on fear and shame, if you pull on one small thread, the entire fucking sweater comes apart. And that's
Yeah.
what's mind-boggling to me is that the not questioning is built in. Because if you're
Oh
not like
yeah, that's the base.
if you question it, you don't have enough faith. If you question it, you're not a true believer. If you
Exactly.
question it, I can't even tell you like as a kid with anxiety how often I thought of like if you're that it's a verse in Revelation of all fucking books that's like, if you're lukewarm, like God will spit you out of his mouth, right? The idea that like if you can't be, it's better to be a full-blown Satanist and not like and totally deny God than it is to be like half-ass in it, right? Which is
Right.
bonkers. Fully bonkers to then teach God is love and try like to reconcile those two things.
Yeah, I was talking to my husband my husband and I both watched Shiny Happy People together, and he was also raised in I think his grandmother claims Catholic faith. Again, Catholicism is very interesting. It's very rooted in tradition. Anyway, I thought God could hear my thoughts and knew
I mean, we're
everything
kind of
that I was
taught that.
thinking.
We're kind of
Yeah.
explicitly taught that.
But he didn't know that. He thought God was like Santa and so could see everything but couldn't hear everything.
Oh, that
And
would have been
so
very freeing as a child.
I bet, yeah. And I think I've said this to you before, but again, like as a child with now finding out I have ADHD, but really incredibly high anxiety, and I've always suffered from intrusive thoughts. And they're, if you know anything, like legitimate intrusive thoughts are completely, they're not just like an impulse to do something.
No,
They
they're
can be
upsetting, they're distressing, like by
the
definition.
horrific things that make me think that in my core I am a bad person. Things I will
Yeah.
to this day never say out loud or tell anybody, even my
Oh, yeah.
therapist. Like bad things pop into my brain, and then I focus on that. I'm like, oh no, like God saw it, God saw it, and I was like, no, 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 no. And then I'd like think in my brain, I'd be like, God, I didn't mean it. I don't know where that came from. And
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
to think that I'm like 6
You're a
when this
baby.
started happening.
Yeah. You little baby. Yeah.
Little
And
baby.
stuff like, and this is just, and again, you don't know what you don't know until you have
Right.
wider context for it. Uh, but yeah, as a kid, I didn't think my prayers went through unless I, like, at bedtime, unless I opened and shut my eyes again.
Little
So it's
screenshot.
like, yeah, a little screenshot, little Cam Jansen action for those of
Click
you who were,
send.
it's
Oh no,
like,
it's in my outbox.
oh
Shoot.
shit, I drafted it and I didn't send it. God damn it. Like, it's where it's like, what? Like, it's just so, it's so interesting to have a wider context of like, like, and truly like silly, goofy, funny. If I had been one of the Duggar children, that may have completely ruined my life. You know what I mean? Like something like that. For highly anxious kids who are very much rule followers, that's a nightmare. That's a
Oh
straight up
yeah.
nightmare. To be
Oh,
able,
that was the thing I was telling you about the pizza parties, right? So, does everybody remember it was like Little Caesars or Domino's did a read through the summer pizza party thing.
wait, are
And
you talking
if you
about Book
could,
It on Pizza
yeah,
with Pizza Hut? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I loved Book
Pizza
It.
Hut.
I was a Book
So,
It
okay,
bitch. I got
tell
all
me
those
what
personal pan pizzas.
what do you do? What is Book It?
Okay, so Book It was a thing, and it used to be buttons, right? Like big ass buttons that you put the star stickers
Yeah.
on, puffy star
Yeah.
stickers. So you would read a book, and then you would a whole ass book, like Jesus fuck, and then you
Uh-huh.
would put the sticker on it, and then you would turn it into Pizza Hut, and you'd get your own personal pan pizza. But it was like 10 books or something.
Yeah. So there was that, and I think maybe Little Caesars, or maybe it was a local
I'm
place
sure
that
they had
was.
some. Yeah.
They and Little Caesars is like a Detroit based, like Detroit
Oh,
people
we have them
love.
here. Yeah, Little
Okay.
Caesars, we have those. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Pizza, we got
So
it. Yeah.
you had to read a book, and it was one of those things where all the other kids were doing it, and if you couldn't or didn't do it, like it was ostracizing. And so I didn't get a reading learning disability diagnosis until I was 33. So like literally as recently as being 31, there was a teacher reading challenge at a school that I
Oh
was
my
teaching
God.
at. And one of my fellow teachers was like, audiobooks don't count. And so I just hit it. I'm
Oh,
fully, I know, fully a woman in my
Laura.
30s who pretended I read books and listened to them on audio. And I'll be like, and so as a kid, not having access to audiobooks, I was either like, okay, I'm really sorry, God, but I'm going to lie so that I can have this pizza party so that I can not be ostracized by my peers. And so all of like I just say all this because it's like either I'm gonna have to lie or I'm gonna and or be
There's no,
embarrassed or
you can't win. You
no.
don't win. It's not, it's fear and shame based. And it's not, it's so interesting. So full disclosure, and I feel like this is going to surprise a lot of people. I still attend church. I still attend church. It's a very, very, very small church. And we actually interviewed my pastor on the podcast. You can look for it. It's John McDonald. But because of who John is, that's the only reason I still attend church. He'll like the Restoration is the name of the church, allows for nuance and questioning and challenging and discussion and all of these things that we're not allowed. Like we're
Hmm.
not allowed in where I like in my experience of Christianity from like late high school into adulthood. That was not a thing. And so being able to have a place where I can hold that nuance and have discussions like that is the only reason I'm still in it. But I can't imagine raising my kids in that context of like, if you fuck up, there's not, there's no space. There's no space for nuance. Like God, like, so when one of my kids was like 5, and we had been attending Restoration. I told you the story, Laura, but when this kid was 5, we had been attending the church for like 6 months, and we had a pool party, and we hosted a pool party here and at our home. And John always likes to tell this story that my 5-year-old at the time they were swimming in the pool, they were playing, like whatever. John's in the pool playing with all the kids and other parents with the kids, and my 5-year-old swims up to him and is like, "Hey, John." And he's like, "Yeah." And she's like, is God ever disappointed in us? And John likes to be like, did not expect to be asked that question at a pool party, let alone from the 5-year-old. And he was like, "You know what, kid's name? Like, let me think. Like, let me think about that, right?" And then was like, "You know what? Actually, we can talk more about this later, but no, God is never disappointed in you. Like, God loves you. God is always delighting in you. God is always," right? Like, and if I had been that kid, the answer would have been like, "Yeah, of course he can. Here are all the different ways. Here are all the different ways you've disappointed God just because you were born a human. Like, let me."
Right. We're
like,
born horrible.
there is nothing good apart from God.
Everyone's
there's nothing
gonna
good
burn
about
in
you.
hell.
By default.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I want to reiterate that. Like, I don't think that either of us are being critical of people who attend and participate in whatever faith and experience faith and spirituality in any capacity.
No.
But I do want to bring this back to, you and I talk a lot about identity and like being told really rigid things about where we should find fulfillment, how we should relate to other people, and what it means to be good within ourselves. And I thought what was really interesting in Shiny Happy People. So Josh Duggar, is that his name?
That's the oldest, yeah.
Oldest. So Josh Duggar molested his sisters, and then they kept filming they kept
Oh, yeah.
filming. And he has since gone on to like run for
He ran for office at one point. One of his brothers ran for office at some point. Yeah.
So his sisters, who he molested, went on a talk show and said things like,
and not just to talk. They went on Megyn Kelly. Right? Like, they went to like a very prominent. This wasn't like, a fucking
local. It wasn't WGN.
Exactly. It wasn't WGN. Yeah.
And they said things like,
we're forced to. We should specify,
yes.
right? Like,
yes,
we're coerced and manipulated to provide this interview.
And on the interview, they're like, nobody told us to do this. Like, nobody, definitely no. This is just us. Like, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't like what other people go through. And they said things like, I hate, we love our brother. We really love our brother. Like, we would hate for anything bad to happen to him. And that is so, they got ostracized for confronting something that was inflicted on them when they should have been protected.
Yep.
And it's so hard to watch.
Absolutely. And having and just to I mean, this was something that I come back to a lot, but having that mindset of like being so deep within something that when you get to a place where you're like, the ideology and maintaining the ideology is more important than the people that are suffering from that ideology.
Yeah.
Why are we even talking about Jesus at this point? Do you know what I mean? Like, that is so antithetical. Like, my journey with queerness and the LGBTQ community, that's where it started. Was in college, I was like, okay, so I am being told, I went to 2 Christian universities. I am being told that God would rather children be in foster care, which is a fucked up, broken system at its core. Because I was a social work major. I was like, you got to be fucking kidding me. Like, all my friends have placement in DCFS. You've got to be shitting me. God would rather that be the situation and the plight of the child than to have 2 dads? You've got to be fucking kidding me. 2 loving dads Really?
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like, that literally makes no sense. Like love and compassion and all of these things that I'm told are, the strongholds and the middle of who Jesus was. That's antithetical to this. Putting ideology and of principles of faith ahead of people who are hurting and who are being harmed by those principles. Like now it is about power and control, and we're not even being shy about it.
Yeah. You mentioned something really important about, I think, patriarchy. I don't want to keep this specific to faith because, like you said, like it's any structure that's trying to seek power. It doesn't patriarchy, capitalism, white supremacy, all of these things are it's so intertwined into all of our groups and structures and systems. But what is so harmful is that it takes a real human need or a human, like it takes compassion and then it manipulates that to be something dangerous that is exploitable.
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
like you want to love your kids, you want to provide safety, and you want to have hope for
Yep.
them. And so then you're told that the specific type of how you get there,
Yes.
like you want to be loved, and so here's how you love. This is the specific way you love, and if you aren't loving that way, you're wrong.
Which is
And so
so
you keep
bonkers
being
to hear,
like,
like, this is the right way to love. Like,
oh
what?
yeah. That's like all that's been my journey is like here are the lessons that I've learned about how I'm supposed to perform things, be. And when it feels wrong, it's something wrong about me. And what I'm
Yes.
learning is like, oh, wait, no. What feels good. And usually what feels good is not harmful.
Yes. Yeah.
Usually.
Right. Right. And having that, well, and you make that distinction by doing inner work.
Mm-hmm.
But what groups like the ones that the Duggars belong to is telling you, no, 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 you don't need to do that inner work because we know you. Like the organization, the structure, what we are telling you is God revealed to us. That's what dictates, right? And it's so. I had a conversation with John one time that was like, where he said, your empathy should not be your liability, right? Like, and it should not be antithetical to your faith. That's not a thing. Like empathy that you feel
Mm,
toward marginalized groups should not, like, to label that as wokeness. What are you talking about?
yeah. To demonize empathy, which is literally to put yourself in someone else's shoes
Which
because
is,
those people's shoes are not,
and that's
oh
that's
God.
Jesus's whole thing.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like it's so funny because like sometimes John will check in and be like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know about God, but I still understand Jesus. Like I get Jesus. Like Jesus was pretty dope. Like I get it.
Yeah. Good
God's a little
guy.
bit harder for me. But I'm like, no, no, no. That was his whole deal.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
now, but then to take that image and be like, no, like be what is it? It's the whole fucking everyone belongs except for you, right? Everyone belongs, but to continue to belong, you've got to operate under this. And I there's so many like being obsessed with sex, and then having something like shiny happy people, where it's like, oh no, this was like there is deep, deep sexual abuse that happens under this organization and framework is just it's fascinating to me,
Yeah.
absolutely fascinating to me.
Yeah. That's gonna have to be a whole other purity, sex, and the
Oh, fully.
purity, sex, and patriarchy. It's gonna be a whole series. Um. Okay. So this is gonna be a two-part. We talk. Part of this was talking about identity and the rigidity of all of this, and stick around for part two because we're going to talk about defining identity and what that means within this context. So don't forget to like and subscribe. keep an eye out for episode part 2.
Part 2.